The last time I looked forward to a Crash Bandicoot game was 20 years ago. Crash 2 was one of my first PlayStation games and I enjoyed it so much that I soon went back to play the first game. It wasn't as good, but I still liked it. I played the third one after it came out and fell in love with that even more. Crash Team Racing soon followed and was great, even if a departure by being a kart racer. I devoured these 4 games. I was totally on board with anything in the Crash series from this point on. And then I played Crash Bash after an eager wait and I wasn't impressed. A repetitive party game with a weird new gorilla character and presentation issues that felt rushed and low budget compared to Naughty Dog's work. I played The Wrath of Cortex warily on the PS2, found it lacking, and then never touched the series again. Meanwhile, I happily followed Naughty Dog's progress, and eventually the Uncharted series and The Last of Us would become some of my favourite games of all time as well. All while I increasingly ignored whatever weird stuff Activision were doing with Crash.
Smash Brandy's cooch.
I even skipped the Insane trilogy because I didn't see the point. And then Crash 4 got announced and I got interested. Something about it caught my eye and I was excited for a Crash Bandicoot game again. And while I was a little late to the party, I have been playing through it extensively lately and it's lived up to expectations. This is where the series should have been all of these years. And so, here are 6 reasons why Crash 4 is a triumphant return that won me over. What have I got? Wow! Crash Bandicoot as a series has had a rough time of it since Naughty Dog moved on to other things. Mediocre games have been the standard in the last 20 years, including dull party game Crash Bash, the lifeless clones Wrath of Cortex and Nitro Kart, and then whatever this mess was finally killed the franchise off in 2010. These games tanked the average review score to the point where it went from 87% exclusively with the Naughty Dog games down to 72% by the time 2010 rolled around. That's 66% without the original trilogy and Crash Team Racing, by the way. That's a huge fall from grace. So it was perhaps wise that Toys for Bob decided that the Crash revival in 2020 was to completely disregard every single game that dragged down the series' quality. With the release of the Insane trilogy a few years before, the series was perfectly positioned for a reboot.
You know, I'm sensing a real fraught history here. How many times have you beaten this clown anyway?
3.
Really? Only 3? Funny. Seemed like more.
And so, Crash 4 canonically forgets the whole series past Crash Team Racing. And Toys for Bob clearly reverse engineered their work on the Switch port of the Insane trilogy to figure out exactly what Naughty Dog did to make the original trilogy so beloved. And with that, it was off to a good start. What have I got? Wow! Playing the levels of Crash 4 is like playing the original trilogy all over again. There was a simplicity to those original games which emphasised tight timing with running and jumping, and while other games tried their best to pile up gimmicks that didn't work remotely as well as the vehicle levels of Warped, Crash 4 pulled those back and focused on platforming with occasional rail sliding and chase sequences. There are no more mechanics involving brainjacking, there are no more tedious monkey ball levels, and Rillaroo is nowhere to be seen. As I've played through Crash 4, every level felt like an extension of what Naughty Dog designed for the original games. The Snack Dimension levels felt like the future levels of Warped, Engine's Junkyard levels felt like a natural evolution of the Cortex Castle levels of the first game, and of course, these jetboard sections are very much the successor to the jetboard sections of Crash 2. The inclusion of this very specific arrangement of crates and this somewhat familiar dinosaur chase are just icing on the cake about how much Crash 4 pays homage to the classic titles, and it's all the better for it. What have I got? It's not all repeated ideas though. While the levels feel like the classic games, they don't feel like a lazy rehash either. Consider ideas like the boat in the Bayou levels or the wall runs that show up a few times. They're brand new concepts, but they fit entirely within the formula. They offer up new, tricky platforming challenges that keep things fresh without spoiling the normal flow of gameplay. Compare this to The Wrath of Cortex, where almost every new idea was clunky and got in the way of itself. The addition of the quantum masks was also a good one, as every single one fits the Crash formula. Akano is basically just the spin move from Crash 3 on steroids for a start, but the final 3 all add new elements that continue to build on the tight platforming. Lani Loli makes you control the presence of platforms in addition to whether or not Crash will land on them. Ika Ika forces you to rethink your jumps while moving upside down, and Kapunawa turns nitro boxes into timed platforms and adds short, timed challenges with platforms that have to be slowed down and navigated before the effect wears off. In fact, the whole game seems laser focused on the classic style of platforming from the first two games, eschewing vehicle sections entirely with the exceptions of a polar chase and the jet board, but even these took place within wider platforming levels. Crash 4 is a perfect balance of great classic ideas with new ideas that gel perfectly with them, and this is key to the game's overall quality. Visually, Crash 4 is amazing. Naughty Dog's intention with the classic trilogy was to recreate styles of classic animation, but the limited tech meant they couldn't fully realize it.
I wanted a world that looked like a cartoon world with a kind of sensibility that was classic cartoons, or sort of it was being reinvented at the time with TV shows like DuckTales, The Simpsons was big, animation was cool again.
Now, Toys for Bob have taken up the mantle, but they can now make the interactive cartoon that the series was always meant to be. Every bit of animation in this game is glorious. Look at that squash and stretch. Look at how expressive everyone is. Look at the many hilarious ways that Crash can die. The animation team at Toys for Bob deserve all the praise in the world for this. Trying to make computer models look like traditional animation isn't an easy task, but they nailed it. There also aren't any cracks in the presentation in the process. The animation is consistently excellent in cutscenes and gameplay, and I don't recall a single bit of animation that looked off in some way. As a nerd for both video games and Looney Tunes, being able to play a game that revels in being a playable Looney Tune makes me very happy indeed. When I played Crash 3 for the first time, I remember thinking it was a little odd that they made a big show out of Coco, Crash's little sister, joining him on his adventure, and then relegating her entirely to tiger riding and jet skiing for a handful of levels. Why bring her along at all if you can't go platforming with her like normal? Clearly, Toys for Bob agreed, which is why Coco prominently joins Crash and gets to be fully playable in every single level you can play as her brother. In practice, she is little more than a reskinned Crash, boasting the same moves as her brother, but it feels like a 20-year injustice got corrected. Not that her inclusion was entirely necessary, but it is nice that she's there. It also means that we get to see the duo act as a duo, working together to save the world, rather than her just nagging Crash over a radio or feeling sidelined in specific levels made for her. Even more pointless, but just as welcome, is the addition of unlockable outfits for the duo, allowing you to dress Crash as a caveman or a southern gentleman, while dressing Coco as a unicorn or an origami geisha. They do absolutely nothing, but they're charming and have names like Mother Clucker. So that's fun. There's been a bit of a mixed reaction to the difficulty of Crash 4. There's a lot of accusations of unfairness and poor design from some players pushing for 100%, but I personally haven't found that. This isn't a brag, I'm terrible at video games, but every single time things have gone wrong in my playtime, I've always felt it was me personally doing something wrong rather than the game being profoundly unfair. Is it frustrating? Oh god yes, it's frustrating. The final main level features a sequence that's resulted in death counts of 70 plus for me, and yet I keep trying to get that low death run. The game has wound me up plenty of times whenever it's asked for pixel perfect jumping. I've let out more exasperated sighs than I can count. And yet, I keep coming back. I want to beat the challenge this game presents to me, and for me, that's how I know it's good. It frustrates and drives me insane, and yet I can't stop playing it. I have abandoned plenty of challenges in games before, and I have little patience for games that genuinely do have unfair difficulty. But with Crash 4, I want to keep playing despite my frustrations. So there you have it. It's tough, and yet it features brilliant level design in line with the classic titles, the animation is gorgeous, and I've just fallen in love with it. Crash Bandicoot 4 is the sequel that the series has been calling out for all this time, and it makes me so happy to know that we have it now. And it also makes me happy to know you got this far in the video. Thank you for watching, and make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more like this in the future. And what did you think of Crash 4 if you've played it? I'd especially like to say thank you to my patrons whose name are on screen right now. You can join them in the link in the description if you'd like to help support the channel too. And that's all for now. I will see you again next time.
Smash Brandy's cooch.